Good evening. Welcome to Small Town Underground. This is a brand new situational awareness. This is June the 27th, 2025. Thank you for checking this out. If you would like to give to the show, you can go to givesendgo.com/smalltownunderground. That is the only link that is available for donations to the channel. It's greatly appreciated. And tonight I wanted to kind of delve into something that I've been researching and looking at. I want to kind of put together little puzzle pieces for you. I'm going to do more of these situational awareness in the other studio because it's hard to line up. I'm going to try to keep Wednesday nights where we can have more interviews. But now that all of this madness is kind of winding down and going into the next chapter, we're going to do some focus episodes on things that you need to know. So I think this was released June 23rd by Garland Favorito, as you can see on the screen. We'll just go ahead and read a little bit of this. So tonight we're going to cover election integrity, all right? And you're probably tired of talking about election integrity. Everybody just wants you to move on, forget about Dominion, forget about how bad the election integrity is in Georgia, election security, however you want to call it. But these things simply cannot be ignored. And in the recent light of our GOP convention, where the state body, the representation of the entire state, got together and we passed a set of resolutions, one of these resolutions was to take the access away from Brad Raffensperger off the Republican ticket. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You're blocking this person from running, but no, what you're doing is you're blocking the access to the Republican Party. You can run as an independent or Democrat, something else, but he is surely not a Republican. And we're going to cover this tonight in detail. So I want to start with this from Voter Georgia, Garland Favorito, Voter Georgia. Republicans rejected Raffensperger, and so should we. An in-depth look at events leading to Brad Raffensperger's disqualifications as a future candidate for the Georgia GOP and the impact of those events on Georgia voters. So, of course, you may be saying to yourself, why do we have to cover this again ad nauseum? But you have to understand that a lot of people do not understand just how bad things are under the Gold Dome. They don't understand the infighting we have with this establishment rhinos versus grassroots patriots who are trying to get elected principled Republicans to protect the citizens, to protect our voting rights, protect everything around us, because really it does come down to the vote. And you have to wonder, you have to ask yourself, why doesn't Georgia listen? And why are they still using these Dominion voting systems? And it's a shame that we have to cover these types of things and get it out to more people. But it's essential moving forward to understand why we don't want people like Brad Raffensperger representing us as Republicans. So we're going to get started here. Let me get this pulled up. And I've already got this pulled up. So this is from Voter Georgia. Let me get this right here. We're going to cover this 14 pages. And it's pretty cool information. I mean, you can continue to fact check this. Obviously, you're not going to hear a lot from Brad Raffensperger that would try to dismiss any of this stuff, because most of this stuff can be fact checked 100%. And there's no spin here. It's just an outline of why Republicans rejected Brad Raffensperger. So here we go. So the first thing, it's an in-depth look at events. So I'm not going to read this entire thing, but I do have a link that you can link up. It's also on my page, so you can read it for yourself. Or if you just want to get this version while this weekend, so you can kind of take it all in. All right. So this lists disqualifying events: Brad Raffensperger's disqualification upon being elected as Republican Secretary of State. Used the taxpayer funds to continually employ his radical political adversaries to help run Georgia elections. And the next set, as SOS, Mr. Raffensperger allowed phantom ballots injected after the November 3rd, 2020 election was conducted to overturn original results of the presidential and U.S. Senate races. Now, remember, Georgia only won by about 115,000 votes in 2024, right? Hardly a landslide, but we have a serious, serious problem in Georgia. It is purple, and it's the Republicans that are costing us all of this, okay? We're not doing things right. You have to understand why it's so important, okay? The next set, during and after the certification of the 2020 general election results, Mr. Raffensperger, let me pull that down just a little bit, actively attempted to thwart all efforts to independently, transparently, and publicly verify the results. After certification of the 2020 general election results, Mr. Raffensperger actively ignored all evidence of fraud, errors, and irregularities that continually surfaced about the election. To this day, Mr. Raffensperger has continually attempted to cover up misdeeds that overturned the 2020 Georgia general election by propagating a variety of false election security claims. All right. Now, mind you also that we've been down to the Capitol. We have tried to question Brad Raffensperger, who just runs away from us. He won't take any questions, hides anywhere that he's at. Gabe Sterling will not talk to us. Of course, Brian Kemp won't talk to us. None of the Gold Dome will talk to us about this. Very, very concerning. So let's move on just a little bit. I'm going to cover a few highlights here. So Brad Raffensperger's disqualification. So I'm going to tie all this in on June. So this was the convention. On June the 7th, the Georgia Republican Convention adopted a package of resolutions that were proposed unanimously by the Platform Committee. One of those resolutions disqualified Brad Raffensperger from running for public office as a Republican and requires the party to fully defend against any action he may take to run for public office as a Republican. So the convention passed this resolution among several very good resolutions. Why did we pass the resolution? It's based on the First Amendment rights of association that political parties, other organizations, and their members employ. It was quickly bolstered on June 12th by an appeals court ruling that confirmed the Catoosa County Republican Party would be injured if they could not decide who can run as a Republican in county elections. That ruling also upheld their free First Amendment free speech rights to put questions of their liking on their primary ballots. We'll also get to that in a minute. All right, this goes into sight the Georgia Republican Party, which refused ballot access for a candidate before in 1992 when David Duke sued the Secretary of State, Max Cleland, in Duke versus Cleland. They attempted to gain ballot access as a candidate for president after a Republican Selection Committee refused to put him on the ballot. The district court eventually rejected Duke's claims. It also goes on to say, while Mr. Raffensperger is not yet committed to run for any office, both of these cases set precedents that will likely exclude him from any future Republican primary tickets until another convention removes the restriction. Now, I want to also point out that the Georgia Republican Party also used this accountability on Jeff Duncan, I believe, the Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, when he publicly came out against Donald Trump last year and supported Kamala Harris and went on TV acting like a fool. The Georgia Republican Party came out, supposedly voted through their executive committee. I don't know if they did the state committee because I know they haven't had a lot of meetings, but they roundly rejected Jeff Duncan and they blocked him from the Republican Party. Now, why would you do that? Why would you have this case of precedent and then you're not going to follow through? But again, we'll get to that in a little bit. So we're just covering Raffensperger. So this starts upon being elected as a Republican Secretary of State. Raffensperger used taxpayer funds to continually employ his radical political adversaries to help run Georgia elections. So this goes back to 2019, where he retained David Becker, the host Georgia election security roundtables, despite his clearly defined track record as an extreme political adversary, adversary, excuse me. So this goes on to cover more. Becker was the subject of a DOJ ethics complaint. has consistently protected Mr. Raffensperger throughout his term, especially with many anti-Trump comments in the 2020 elections. Quote, "We have to understand that many voters are being subjected to a constant toxic diet of lies fed to them by election losers, and in particular, the former president." So obviously, that's not a very good stance to have, not very good people to have working on this. Raffensperger entered into a 2019 agreement to have the state of Georgia join Becker's Electronic Registration and Information Center, which is ERIC. Now, you'll hear a lot more of that in a lot of these cases, under the guise of helping to maintain Georgia voter rolls. The bylaws require states like Georgia to send ERIC the personal identifying information for all Georgia voters and drivers without their knowledge or consent, and likely in violation of both federal and state law. Okay? And this is pretty blatant here. Okay? And like I said, don't take my word for it. You can fact check every bit of this. Emails show the Raffensperger's top election staff members were aware Eric sent the PII of Georgia voters and drivers to another Becker organization, the Center for Election Innovation and Research. Now, you've never heard of this stuff, right? There is a ton of bureaucratic lawfare and unelected positions that go along with all of this electronic voting that's just crazy. Okay. The transfer of Georgia's PII without knowledge or consent to CEIR also likely violated federal and state law. All right. Emails also show that Raffensperger's top election staff members were aware SARE used PII to send partisan mailers to Georgia voters or drivers, warning them about election disinformation. This was an apparent attempt to quell distrust in reported 2020 election results. So you understand all of this was planned and put on a table and gamed. SARE was supported by over $67 million in funding from Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg through his Center for Technologies and Civic Life. So you understand where Mark Zuckerberg was spending all of this money in Georgia during the 2020 election, and a lot of this was going straight to these weird organizations that were surrounded by elections. So I'm making sure that you can see that. Raffensperger allowed Zuckerberg's CTCL to provide $45 million in politically partisan funds to Georgia counties. The Zucker Bucks right here were spent mostly on partisan get-out-the-vote efforts, installation of unsecured drop boxes, and technical resources used to gain control of electronic voting equipment in some counties, as shown and in the standard CTCL contract terms. Zuckerberg spent over $330 million to establish CTCL, all right, which employed its policy director, David Plouffe, a former Obama campaign manager who wrote the book A Citizen's Guide to Beating Donald Trump. So, I mean, this is set up from the get-go, guys. This goes on. I'm not going to read the entire thing. A lot of stuff that happened in Fulton County. Despite objections from numerous citizens, Mr. Raffensperger signed a $107 million contract on August 12, 2019 to buy a Dominion Democracy Suite 5.5 voting system that accumulates votes in QR codes unverifiable to the voters. About 2 years earlier, Dominion's then Director of Strategy and Security, Eric Coomer, posted rabid, vile anti-Trump social media statements. All right. After originally claiming his social media posts were fabricated, Coomer admitted that they were his. So, of course, they were lying about all these things. You know, they're all anti-Trump, anti-Republican in nature. A technology company founder, Joel Altman, signed a sworn affidavit that the person he now knows as Eric Coomer joined an Antifa call Altman infiltrated and stated, "Trump is not going to win. I made effing sure of that." Quote. Of course, Coomer originally denied the call took place. Court proceedings have now forced acknowledgement of the existence of the call, but Coomer denies he was on it. But he admits to a social media post of what is referred to as the Antifa manifesto, as well as incredibly rabid cop killer videos. What does that say about the system's choice of executives? So you understand, You say we gotta put this to rest. You say that we just need to forget about this, but look at all of the evidence that points to a fraudulent 2020 election set up by our own Republicans, no less, in Georgia. Okay? A month after he admitted to being a former heroin and cocaine addict, which we'll skip that. Okay, I got you. There's a lot of good stuff in here that you need to read. But Mr. Raffensperger also accepted the many voting system requirements that Georgia use ballots printed by Runbeck election systems without a contract, except for emergency situations. Runbeck has acknowledged that owner Kevin Runbeck donated to the Obama presidential campaign, and his brother Brian made 28 donations to Act Blue. Again, they shut down the 2020 elections because of a leaky water pipe, if you guys remember. Okay? Mr. Raffensperger employed Voting Works, another company receiving funds from George Soros through his foundation to promote open society, to conduct the fatally flawed November 14, 2020 presidential hand count audit. 2 years earlier, Executive Director Ben Adida made a series of rabid anti-Trump, anti-GOP social media posts such as F. Donald Trump and his enablers. He also claimed posts that Trump is the ultimate xenophobe, GOP is rotten, and stated the whole party is rotten to its core. Wow. Okay. So moving along, January 2022, Mr. Raffensperger announced he would outsource Georgia's voter registration data to a cloud database maintained by Salesforce, despite having no legal authority to do so. The chief executive officer, Mark Binhoff, sits on the board of trustees for Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum, which boasts George Soros as an agenda contributor. Now, you understand when I make these posts about Georgia being a globalist world leader, our own governor who keeps going to the WEF and selling his state out to a complete corporatocracy here. It's crazy. So a year earlier, Salesforce and Binhoff falsely claims General Assembly Bills SB 202 and HB 531 were limiting trustworthy, safe, and equal access to voting. Despite being in California, Salesforce posted that Governor Kemp should not sign SB 202, which he did anyway. And Binhoff posted the Salesforce opposed HB 531. Salesforce supported Stacey Abrams' new Georgia project in Get Out the Vote efforts. Again, you can fact check all of this stuff. So, continuing on, Mr. Raffensperger allowed phantom ballots injected after the November 3rd, 2020 election was conducted to overturn original results of the presidential and U.S. Senate races. Let's see, let me keep this a little bit low here so everybody can see that. On the morning after the election, Mr. Raffensperger confirmed on the NBC Today show that the final total of 4.7 million ballots cast, with only 2% remaining to be counted, about 94,000 ballots. At the time, President Trump had a lead in Georgia of 103,750 votes. The secretary said the counting would be finished that day and would not change the outcome. When challenged, he emphasized, "We don't guess." I remember this. Remember that? We don't guess. He eventually certified 4.9 million votes on just over 5 million ballots, nearly 300,000 more than he had said were left to be counted. The still unexplained phantom ballots overturned the results of both the presidential race and the U.S. Senate race between Senator David Perdue and then candidate Jon Ossoff. Wow. Again, every bit of this can be fact-checked. Mr. Raffensperger's own SOS results posted just after his NBC interview confirmed that 99.5% of the votes counted. President Donald Trump and Senator David Perdue had insurmountable leads of 101,000, 78,000 votes, respectively, in the presidential and U.S. Senate races, with only 13 Fulton County precincts left to vote. There's Fulton County again. All right, let's see here. He approved the Voting Works 2020 election audit procedure despite a broken chain of custody that required counties to put their audit results into the SOS Arlo system, which denied them the ability to determine the results of their own audit. Do you seen a pattern here of how many bureaucratic, different organizations, non-governmental agencies that are all of this stuff is going through, when a simple paper count with an audit done at the county level in the precinct could solve every bit of this problem. It'd be fully auditable. But wow, just layer after layer of different systems and different electronic companies and different people involved and all this stuff, which makes the finger pointing, the carousel of accountability very hard to track. And thank God for the people that have been on this and tracking this. You must understand how serious this is. Mr. Raffensperger illegitimately certified the 2020 general election results because a subsequent state election board complaint, SEB 2023-25, compiled extensive evidence about the Fulton County 2020 general election records, including that, and there's several numbers, 17,852 election ballots have no .tif ballot image, 3125 were double scanned, 20,000 ballots from 10 tabulators, and what is it? 17,234 presidential race votes were backfilled into December 4th final certified results. I mean, so many different problems here. The SEB subsequently identified 346 potential process violations committed by Fulton County in its handling of the 2020 election during the May 7th, 2024 SEB meeting, which was just last year. A 2022 Voter Georgia study found compelling evidence that mail-in ballot images were electronically altered before Fulton County certified its 2020 election results. Now, we're only halfway through here. So, I'm going to kind of speed it up. During and after the certification of the 2020 election results, Mr. Raffensperger actively attempted to thwart all efforts to independently, transparently, and publicly verify the results. He filed an amicus brief in Fulton County counterfeit ballot case, attempting to prevent citizen plaintiffs from looking at it or receiving a copy of it. I mean, man, this is just filled with stuff. Mr. Raffensperger sought a writ of mandamus in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals against a U.S. District Court judge to avoid testifying in the Curling versus Raffensperger case. Okay? I mean, he runs and hides all over the place. He would not testify. Concerning the Dominion voting systems, after claiming in his book that the ultimate fact check in the United States occurs in courts of law where witnesses swear to tell the truth, and if you want to know the truth, watch what happens in court. Oh! This is laughable. Mr. Raffensperger refused all calls for forensic examinations after the Dominion voting system was never able to produce accurate 2020 Coffee County election results. Meanwhile, his previous SOS legal counsel wrote in December 10th, 2020, email to the SOS chief investigator stating a Coffee County election board member was lying when he provided detailed evidence of the repeated voting system malfunctions to the Georgia General Assembly, and told them that the SOS offered no help. Whew. I mean, a variety of statements in 2024. I mean, this has been going on for years, as explained in expert testimony presented. So that's why these SEB meetings are so important to watch. Mr. Raffensperger's lead investigator told the SEB on May 7th, 24, furthermore, the preservation of ballot images was not required in 2020, even though ballot images are clearly election records, which are required to be preserved for at least 22 months under federal and state law, guys. You cannot make this stuff up. I've seen the testimony. How on earth, furthermore, the preservation of ballot images was not required in 2020? That is insane, people. Mr. Raffensperger, legal counsel, told the SEB on May 7th that the ballot images, batches, loaded reports, and tabulator tapes play no role in the actual tabulation of results in an election, even though ballot images are required to create cast vote records. My God, man. So let's see here. They also said that the legal counsel said they could not determine whether or not duplicate 2020 election ballots were scanned and counted in Fulton County despite expert testimony and forensics showing that over 3,900 ballots were double counted. Now, what was it? The impeachment call that was recorded by Raffensperger's office about, what was it, 12,000, 13,000, 14,000 votes. That's how close that this election was. And we're talking about 300,000 ballots. We're talking about all of these different numbers and different agencies, these different people that have their hands on every bit of this stuff, and they're going and testifying, saying they don't have to hold on to the ballots. They don't want the public to look at this stuff. I mean, this is you cannot make this up. Mr. Raffensperger's office was found by a U.S. District Court to be flatly not credible in providing phony excuses for destroying evidence when election preparation server data was wiped just days after the Curling versus Raffensperger case was originally filed. He also actively fought in state superior court to retain Georgia Dominion Democracy Suite 5.5 voting system, even though eyewitness expert witness testimony showed the system cannot meet 2005 Election Assistance Commission standards under which it was allegedly certified because it stores encryption keys in the clear, plain database text, which you've probably seen the shirts. He actively resisted any attempts to audit other races after the Dominion voting system declared the wrong winners in the 2022 DeKalb District 2 Commission primary. This includes his own 2022 primary, in which the system awarded him 51% of the vote after polling 18 to 39% up until the day before the election. My goodness. After certifying the 2020 general election results, he actively ignored all evidence of fraud, errors, and irregularities. So this goes down in, oh my gosh, invalid chain of custody documentation for 107,000 absentee ballots. I mean, these are the people that's supposed to be in charge of it. Really, state election law, your precincts, your county election is supposed to be in charge of this crap. Mr. Raffensperger took no action after evidence showed the destruction of 1.7 million original ballot images statewide, despite federal and state 2-year election record retention law. So they destroyed ballots. He took no action after the 2020 Dropbox videos for 181,000 dropped-off ballots were destroyed in conflict with the same 2-year federal and state election record retention periods. No actions in regards to missing chain of custody documentation for up to 355,000 Dropbox ballots, thus preventing the ballots from being authenticated. Took no action to determine why 86,860 voters in the 2020 election had voter registration dates before 2016, but the list of registered voters from 2016 had no record for them. And he never publicly produced a numbered list of voters for 2020 general election or an eligible list of voters as required by law. Took no action after a U.S. District Court order found that the current Dominion voting system violates 2 Georgia statutes for voter verifiability. The chief operating officer continually claimed activities at State Farm Arena were normal ballot processing, ignoring a curved room that inhibits election monitors' viewpoints, employing skirted tables and hiding ballots under tables conflict with the Georgia election transparency law. We've seen all of this stuff. And he's continually covered up the misdeeds that occurred. So this goes on to talk about what he said in a committee at 2022 and on national TV, quote, "We had a safe, secure, honest election and that Georgia has a verifiable paper ballot, even though he knew Georgia's votes were accumulated in quick response QR codes. The voter cannot verify, and in spite of the documented evidence of fraud, errors, and irregularities." I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. So, I'm going to go down here. I mean, there's tons of information in this, okay? So, I think there's Ware County, another U.S. District Court order. I mean, there's tons of stuff in this document that needs to be read, okay? Now, let me see. There's a summary here, and I'm not going to read this entire summary, but I covered a lot of this. But I need to move on to understand. So you need to understand why the resolution was voted by the state body to remove him from the party. This is not very Republican-like here. I mean, this is not Republican or Democrat-like. And it's a shame that the Democrats don't even understand what's going on here. But just because it's Republicans that are mad about the voting systems, all of a sudden they've got to shut up about it, because they're sheeple. They don't care. And then this, of course, the last page is about Voter Georgia, which I highly recommend that you go and check out Voter Georgia, Garland Favorito, and all the groups' work, because it's well worth it. But again, I know that that probably sounded a little long. But we're going to continue on here because at the state convention this year in 2025, I'm bringing up the resolution here. I'm going to make sure I got it right there. So this was the resolution in particular that was voted on by the state body of the Republican Party. Resolution maintaining Republican unity and branding. Whereas Brad Raffensperger does not have the faith and confidence of the Georgia Republican Party, and the First Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees the ability of political parties to choose their own nominees for office without government interference. Freedom of association means that it would be unconstitutional for legislation or politicians to require the Republican Party to associate with any person that the Georgia Party deems repugnant to its brand or the principles of the United States of America, and where they would lose elections if brand is not maintained. Therefore, they shall not allow to be qualified, or take any action to allow Raffensperger to qualify as a Republican or run for any elected office unless and until the convention removes the restriction. And the Republican Party shall fully defend against any future litigation or legal actions taken. Now, why am I reading this to you after reading all that? Well, obviously, it's pretty well warranted that as a principled Republican, somebody who stands up for what does it mean to be a Republican, Brad Raffensperger is definitely not acted in the interest of the Republican Party, the interest of the Constitution, or the interest of voter security at all. And there's so much evidence to back up these claims, okay? He should not be able to run as a Republican, just like Jeff Duncan, just like David Duke, just like the people. He will cost us votes because Republicans will not hold their nose and stand for this any longer. However, there's a caveat going on right now. Shortly after the election of the chairman who won his re-election campaign from AJC Politics, Georgia GOP chair says party won't block Raffensperger bid for higher office. This is Josh McCoon, who won his re-election campaign. And the body of the convention voted on the resolution to, among many, to block Brad Raffensperger from the access to the Republican ticket. And this was June 10th. Fresh off his re-election as Georgia GOP Chair, Josh McCoon said he would not block Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger from the ballot if he chooses to run in 2026. Quote, "I'm not going to put the Republican Party in the position of being sued over ballot access," he said on Tuesday. Now, that's all I can read right now because the rest of it is blotted out. But basically, that's the meat and potatoes, is that he will not honor the Georgia GOP's call to remove Raffensperger from the Republican ticket. Now, you must have to ask yourself why. Why on earth would we protect somebody like this who has done nothing but damage to not only the Republican Party, but to the election security? So, let's fast forward here to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. This is on the 13th. It says, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals rules in favor of Catoosa's GOP's right of association on the primary ballot. This is done by Nathaniel Darnell from the GRA. The Federal 11th Circuit Court of Appeals has reversed the trajectory of the Catoosa GOP's case, dealing with the right to refuse to allow 4 Rhino past-serving commissioners to run again as Republicans in the primary. We felt confident this would eventually happen as the case made its way up the ladder in federal appeals process because SCOTUS precedent on this subject is so clearly favorable to the Catoosa GOP's position. The court also rebuked the lower court Judge Bill Ray in Rome for not recognizing the Catoosa GOP's right to freedom of speech when the Board of Elections refused to publish the questions of Catoosa Republican primary had submitted for the primary ballot last year. So there's a twofer here. So they won in the 11th Court Circuit of Appeals on the right of freedom of association, and they also won the decision where they were excluded their questions on the ballot. And this covers the release of that. Obviously, this is still in the court system. It's going to keep going. And let's see if I need to cover anything on here. So Republican Party officers are supposed to... Yeah, this is from the Georgia Republican Assembly for resignation, call, misinformation. Republican politicians are supposed to be accountable to the Republican Party platform, and voters that elected them. Republican Party officers are supposed to be accountable to a Republican Party members. The Georgia Republican Assembly is at core the Republican wing of the Republican Party. That's a lot of Republicans. And consists of Republican Party members who agree with basic core Republican principles that we all agree on when we become members. Unlike pay-to-play organizations, they're committed to enacting their members' will. Not any group of small leaders trying to control members in order to increase donor dollars. We bring in and engage good Republicans from the public, and we empower them to be heard, including but not limited to Robert's Rules training, endorsements, so on and so forth. So this, I'm not going to really cover this. A lot of people out there know that there's a sort of an exodus from the GRA, but this lays out pretty well right here. From the groundbreaking GRA-endorsed resolutions that were passed. So we had banning Brad Raffensperger from qualifying as a Republican in Georgia, censuring House Speaker John Burns for his actions towards Senator Colton Moore, supporting the Anti-Corruption Act, which if passed would end Kemp's leadership committees that allow unlimited fundraising by certain favored politicians and would end government being able to pay to lobby government, and commending Senator Colton Moore for standing for Republican principles. So basically, I'm going to summarize this up. Now, what are we doing in Georgia if we cannot deal with accountability for election security, what the Secretary of State has done and continues to do under this Georgia leadership? It's very important you understand what is going on here. Now, again, you have every right to go to this recent Vote of Georgia page, Garland Favorito. It's posted on Smallton Underground, and read this 14-page document for yourself. You can go visit all the links. There is a plethora of information by the peasants on the ground, people, ordinary citizens that have stood up in the state to fight for election security and right the wrongs, right? We want to be rid of Dominion voting systems. The Georgia leadership will not listen to that at all. Furthermore, the Georgia GOP is now refusing to enact the will of the body of the GOP, which is to take Brad Raffensperger's ability to run as a Republican away after all of this. So I asked the question, after reading all of this and thinking about this and understanding just how serious this is, what direction is the Republican Party headed in? Are we just being gatekeepers for Brian Kemp and the rhino establishment that we have now? Okay, where is the accountability and the transparency in any of this? I cannot find it here. I think it's abhorrent that this resolution is going to be, or is not going to be enforced. Now, the quote was that they were not going to block them, and it further went on to say that they had a fiduciary responsibility to protect the GOP. Well, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals has now ruled in that favor. So why would we not do this? Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that things can't change and that this eventually won't happen, but right now it's not looking good. But folks, this is why you need to be paying attention to what's going on in your state. We are not protected just because these people have an R next to their name. They are not fighting for the citizens of Georgia. They're not fighting for transparency, truth, and accountability. Okay, Brad Raffensperger has done everything in his power to quash the 2020 election, to run away from anything. As you can read, filed motions not to testify in these cases, has repeatedly blocked all sorts of information from coming out or being verified. They've destroyed ballots. They've done all of these things. Just because we won in 2024 with Donald Trump, we literally won by 115,000 and some change votes in this state. So it is a dire consequence that we demand that we get better representation than what we have now. Because there is absolutely no way that I can hold my nose and vote for somebody like Brad Raffensperger, even though he's a Republican, with these kinds of issues going on, and it's not going to happen. Again, it will be the Republicans that will cost this state in 2026 if we do not fix this, if we do not hold these people accountable, if we do not fix the broken election system, if we do not get rid of Dominion voting systems. It's going to continue on. So I hope that this can be a sort of a catalyst to get you thinking about jumping in the game, getting in touch with Voter Georgia, getting in touch with GRA, other organizations all around the state that are trying to hold Republicans accountable. Because right now, the message is you can be the best candidate in the world. You can have the best ideas. You have the best principles. You can be the best person for the job. But if you're not a part of the carousel, if you don't have that seat already at the table, you might as well kiss it goodbye. It is unacceptable to me. And as a conservative in this state who's trying everything they can to protect the rights of the citizens, to get equal and fair voting, transparent voting, trying to stop this massive corporatocracy that is in this state, this global effort to push us into the next whatever, I won't stand for this. So I hope that you find some knowledge in this and check out the links, check out Voter Georgia, get some skin in the game, get involved, start asking questions on your county level. What in the world is going on, folks? Thank you very much. This has been a Situational Awareness, and I'll see you soon.